So last week, BYU's Kennedy Center invited Hani Al-Madoun, who is the Senior Director of Philanthropy at the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, often called UNRWA. This is a little odd since throughout this year, it has been exposed that UNRWA is a Hamas-run organization. In February, earlier this year, 2024, it was exposed through Israeli investigation that Hamas had completely infiltrated UNRWA and is apparently working hand in hand with the Commissioner General Lasserini. Now, UNRWA is a relief organization, so they're helping with soup kitchens and clothing and anything that could be given in places like Gaza and West Bank, and they're also in Lebanon. But you'd have to have your head in the sand to think that the Commissioner General of UNRWA does not know that it is infiltrated by Hamas. Now, this episode is brought to you by Go and Do Travel. I'm the official spokesperson for them and their trip, The Journey of Wisdom. This is September 2025, the 12th through the 24th. We're visiting Turkey, we're visiting Greece, and we're visiting Egypt. We will pit the philosophies of men against the gospel of Jesus Christ as we visit these locations, including the Isle of Patmos, Athens, Ephesus, the Great Pyramids, the Sphinx, and Memphis. Go to cwicmedia.com, that's cwicmedia.com. Scroll to the top, trips and events, and then scroll down to Journey of Wisdom. So then later on June 8th, 2024, a UN probe itself, a UN probe, confirms the participation of UNRWA staff in the October 7th massacre. So oftentimes posing as a UN worker, Hamas workers, officials, lieutenants, captains are actually using that cover to disguise themselves as they plan and execute terrorist activities. It's funny, I was on X here and I saw this actually pull up just before I put this recording together, but this is Daniel Rubenstein. He writes a Substack on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He says, UNRWA says at least 243 UNRWA personnel have been killed in the war. You need to keep this in mind. I will keep asking a simple question until I get a simple answer. Okay, it's a good reason. What are their names? Why would that matter? Elan Levy responds, he's the former spokesman for the State of Israel, says, I'll explain his question. UNRWA can't name its staff killed in the war because then Israel will cross-check them against a list of known Hamas terrorists and show how deeply Hamas has infiltrated this agency. Again, BYU invited a representative from this agency. And then just on September 30th of 2024, it was confirmed that the Hamas commander in Lebanon doubled as an UNRWA school principal. Fatah Sharif, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike, was an UNRWA employee. He doubled as a school principal and headed the UNRWA Teachers Association in Lebanon. Of course, Lasserini says that he didn't know that Sharif was a Hamas commander. So then BYU, who has to know about all of this, invites an official of UNRWA, who happens to be a BYU alum, to speak at the Kennedy Center at BYU. His talk is called Perfect Love Casts Out Fear. And again, lots of good things, I think, that came from this. There is a lot of relief, a lot of humanitarian aid and things that is done here through some of these individuals, at least. But by all reports of those that were at the presentation, it was all Hamas talking points. And Mr. Al-Madoun got a resounding standing ovation as he claimed that we need to get rid of all of the Israeli evil. I wonder if there will be a similar person invited to BYU to give a different point of view. Jabra Ghanem, a friend of mine, a Palestinian-born American, and an academic, discusses this visit and presentation at BYU. Now, interestingly, just this last week, BYU invited Hani Al-Madoun, who is the Senior Director of Philanthropy for UNRWA.
Yes.
I don't think when they probably originally invited him that they knew that all this was coming and the controversy was there. And I don't know. I mean, how you would think that those that are in charge of the Kennedy Center are very, they've got their ear to the ground on things. They know what's going on. They know there are questions about this organization and its affiliation with Hamas. I would think what, and he is a, Mr. Al-Madoun here is a BYU alum.
Yeah.
Right. So he went to BYU, and maybe he's a great guy. But it's just interesting that this is who they invited to come speak at the Kennedy Center.
I know. And this has come as a surprise to me. I mean, I saw the announcements on it through friends on social media, and I was like, I mean, I kind of know Hani. He is a great guy.
Yeah.
He's doing great work, the soup kitchen in Gaza. But when I looked at the announcement, and BYU usually, the church in general and church organizations are usually very cautious in how they portray and how they present. And I know that BYU specifically is trying to build bridges with the Jewish community and Jewish organizations. They've been doing that for years. Especially Elder Cook, he seems to be the Jewish outreach person.
Okay.
So I was shocked with a bold move like that. On one hand, I'm not against reaching out. I'm not against honoring alums, but to invite someone who is a director at UNRWA and actually put that on the program, given everything that's been happening, that was very surprising to me.
It's kind of a hot potato,
a hot potato, and it sends the wrong message. And then, there were some posts on social media with some slides and of the content. I was like, okay, they are presenting him. They are proud of him, of what he has attained as a BYU alum. But then I looked at some of the slides, and they were Hamas talking points, basically. The lies, the Hamas lies that, for example, Gaza was this great prison on earth, surrounded on all sides, that, there is genocide, that, I've heard that he said, I want the evil Jews to be away from me, things like that. Usually BYU is more cautious in that. And I didn't hear of any push against his points, against his historical errors during the presentation, during the Q&A. I didn't hear of anyone pushing back, and you'd think some of these professors would know better. But the problem to me, it seems, I remember my days at, I've just had my PhD 4 years ago, so I was in campus, but I wasn't involved in the Middle East scene much because I was in a different department. But 25 years ago, when I did my master's degree, we taught BYU and the Kennedy Center were aligned with church doctrine when it came to Israel. Israel is the homeland of the Jews. I mean, every church president, I pulled it up, every single church president from Joseph Smith to President Nelson has said, Israel is the land of the Jews, the homeland of the Jews. We have this doctrinal position that Israel is the homeland of the Jews. That's what we're built on. The Jews will return, including the gathering, that's the state of Israel. We have all of these positions. And so 25 years ago, that was the position. That's what you were taught as a Middle Eastern studies student. It was hard to be anti-Israel on campus. It was hard to advocate, not that that was right, but it was hard to advocate for Palestine on campus. You couldn't even say it. And so now it seems to me that there is a flip. And I've had some personal encounters with people, and I'm not going to name names, but I've had encounters with faculty where, my positions. And when I started, tried to start a dialogue, it was shut down quickly. Mm-hmm. You can't, even though I'm of Palestinian origins.
Yeah. Well, they know better than you, Jabra. Come on.
They know better than me. Exactly. We know better than you. And here is, with all due respect to people who have that opinion, I hope I don't come across as arrogant, because trust me, I value all opinions. But by the time I graduated from high school, I would say my second year in college, I knew 10 times more than any Middle Eastern Studies professor on campus. I know the 3 languages of the region. I read them. I speak them. I lived 33 years of my life in the region. I know how people think. So for someone to condescend to me and tell me, oh, I don't want to listen to you because I know better, that irritates me. I'm willing to listen to people. I respect their opinions, of course. Yeah. And believe me, I changed my positions on so many things, including Israel.
Mm-hmm.
But for someone to come and condescend to me, that's unacceptable. And so I met with many of the faculty, and I can tell that they've created maybe an environment in the classroom where all anti-Israel, like even advocating for Israel, advocating for the return of the Jews, advocating for Israel as a homeland of the Jews, have been vilified. And there is a book by
at BYU.
At BYU, my friend Jason Olson, I mean, if you read his memoir, The Burning Book, and he talks about his years at BYU, at the Kennedy School, at the Kennedy Center, and he talks about how, he couldn't even say 2 words for Israel in a classroom, and he felt shut down and he felt alienated. And I think that continues. I've talked to people I've known for many years, and who have had the Kennedy Center experience, and it seems like the atmosphere has flipped. And that was obvious when they invited Hani to give this talk. There was no pushback against the narrative, but they have also not invited anyone, representing the Israeli point of view to talk at the Kennedy Center. Like, since 7/10 happened, imagine, this is a momentous event in history. The Kennedy Center, to my knowledge, has not invited any pro-Israel person to advocate or to talk about what happened, or to present to the students, the facts as they are on the ground, or the Israeli point of view. And when they chose to do something about the region, they invite an UNRWA representative and put it out there in the program. And again, Hani is doing great work with the soup kitchen, feeding people. Nothing against that at all. But the presentation, that 1 or 2 slides about the situation in Gaza, no pushback. Nobody has been invited from the Israeli side. And the church and the Kennedy Center people know many people from, who can represent and talk about the Israeli side. Heck, we have even members of the church who live in Israel, who can come and talk about it, but nobody wants.
Unfortunately, though, it just doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me that isn't happening.
What needs to be, and this is my point of view, there was, I don't know if you've ever watched the Netflix show The Crown, about Queen Elizabeth.
My wife has watched it. I have not seen it.
Well, it's a good lesson in history. I watched it. I'm like a buff on Imperial British history. I love it. But there is a scene when the queen wants a certain secretary. Now, remember, this is after the abdication of her uncle. Her dad becomes king, then she becomes queen. And King Edward is like this pariah now. Nobody likes him, and they've learned the lessons from him. And so she wants the secretary. So she goes to her, head of secretaries or something, and she says, I want this person. And he says, no, there is an order to this. We have to have this person be your secretary. And we know you like this person, and it's your choice, but we prefer that this. And so she says, no, I've decided. And she starts walking out, and he's like, you know how the abdication happened? And she stands there and she listens. He says, it started with the small things. It started with your uncle refusing to live at this palace. It started with you. And he started mentioning all of these little things. And then you can see and I hate the slippery slope, but I'm going to use it here. You started seeing the slippery slope towards the abdication and towards collaborating even with Hitler. And that's when she changes her mind and she starts following the protocol. And I think, and Elder Holland gave a great talk a few years ago about this, about BYU and what's happening. And it was rough for some to hear. But the rot starts with the small things. So now we're having the head, someone from UNRWA speaking on campus. Nothing against Hani. It's just UNRWA. Then you start having, I don't know, Queers for Palestine on campus. Then you start having the LGBTQ, presenting at the Kennedy Center or whatever. And it will just go into a direction that does not align with what the church wants and what the church doesn't want to see. And that is the problem. Students are at the Kennedy Center, especially Middle Eastern Studies students, are there to understand the Middle East. And you can't teach them about the Middle East without presenting both points of view equally and as strongly as possible. Fine, you want Hani there, standing there, talking about Gaza as the biggest prison on earth. Then let's have someone from the Israeli side saying, well, if it was this big prison on earth, where did they get the resources to build hundreds of kilometers of tunnels under Gaza? Here are videos that show Gaza as this amazing place to live. Where did they get the resources for that? How about the tens of thousands of Gazans who came to work in Israel for amazing salaries? How about, the Hamas going after the Israelis who actually were pro-peace and, who helped them, who took their families to hospital? We need to hear both opinions. True education doesn't happen when you go into a silo and shut down the opposite opinion. And I feel that's what's happening. And let me, having said all of that, let me say this. Many of the people at the Kennedy Center, again, come from a good place. They come from a gospel-oriented place. We need to love people. I'm totally aligned with that. But what's not happening is that they've allowed themselves to be biased to one side and teaching only one point of view.
Well, they're a part of academia, and that is the almost the default official position.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes, once education becomes ideological, once ideology gets into it. And I know I'm not saying we can be objective 100%. But there are ways for us to strive towards objectivity and, minimize the impact of our own subjectivity. And we do that by going to the places and listening to the people we do not want to listen to, and, listening to the things and opinions, no matter how hurtful they are, of the other. If we do not do that, then we are not providing true education. So, that's what needs to happen. Now, that's not happening right now, I feel, at the Kennedy Center. And unless I hear that they decided to bring in someone to present the Israeli side, the side that they do not like. And there are many. What I don't want to happen is for them to bring someone from Jewish Voice for Peace or from J Street or something like that who is pro-Palestinian and say, hey.
Yeah, basically anti-Zionist.
Yeah, anti-Zionist. We need to, the students at BYU need to hear the Zionist perspective, because the Zionist perspective is a legitimate perspective. If they calm down and, just listen, not talk. They calm down, they will understand it's a legitimate perspective. And it is a perspective that aligns with the gospel, to be honest. There's
always hope.
Deny it. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the irony. I mean, it's like in my PhD program, I had an amazing program director, and I loved him. He's this old guy, he's like Yoda, very revered. And that's one thing he taught. And he said, when we started this program, the goal of this program is to produce scholars whose views align with the gospel, who can go out and they can look at research with gospel eyes, who can look at, these things, but you're in the background, you have the doctrine of the gospel. And that's the goal. I think it is, unless something has changed, of every department at BYU. I mean, that's why we started the medical school. That medical school is, for example, isn't going to be just any medical school. It's going to be
it's aligned with the mission of the church.
Aligned with the mission of the church, the humanitarian mission of the church.
You know what's interesting, Jabra, and I spoke to a group once that had, I'm not going to say which department it was at BYU, but I was there visiting, and they had recently changed their mission statement.
Oh.
And they not only changed their mission statement, but they in the floors, they didn't have the whole building, but the floors that they were on and occupying within the building, they changed all of the paintings and things that were up on the wall to gospel centered. And this is not the religion department.
Yeah.
Right. But there's pictures of Christ, and their mission statement has the words Jesus Christ in it.
Yes.
What's interesting is if you go through all the mission statements of the departments and the colleges, most of them don't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't have that even in their mission statement.
I think the Department of Education does, and now I'm kicking myself in the head because I should know it, but I think the Department of Education is very focused on the gospel and the church's mission. But yeah, I mean, my view has always been the gospel isn't just something we do at church. It's an essential part of our identity and being, and it needs to be at the center of everything we do. Everything, your daily job, how you interact with your neighbors, how you present in the world, how you do anything and everything. Because BYU is, and I know this is a cliche, and I apologize to your audience, but it is the Lord's church. It is the Lord's church. And so people at the Lord's church need to look at things from the Lord's point of view. So we take this standard and we look at this presentation at the Kennedy Center, and the Lord would have been happy with, Hani's efforts to feed and, the soup kitchen and all of that. Now, wish it stayed at that. But then there was hate expressed, lies, the perspective basically of a terrorist organization presented in that meeting. And I don't think that's a part of the gospel. That's not what we want people to learn. Now, you get informed about it, but I think in an event like that, it shouldn't have happened. I wish they controlled the message a little tighter. I wish they looked at those PowerPoints. I wish they told him, just talk about the soup kitchen, talk about that perspective.
The humanitarian portion of things.
The humanitarian portion, the portion that aligns with what we do.
And that part's great.
Yeah, and that part is great. That part is the Lord's work. That's the part we need to support. But but him being a part of UNRWA, putting that in the program, then presenting the UNRWA Hamas perspective on the Gaza history, that is controversial and not needed and shouldn't happen at BYU. And now, now that it's out, I feel it's the obligation of the Kennedy Center to go out and say, well, we're going to bring in someone who is a Zionist, and we need to have the students listen to the Zionist perspective. Why does Israel exist? What's the background? Why are the things that we're told about Gaza not accurate?
Yeah. And hopefully someone will see this show and do something about it. But I'm not going to hold my breath.
So let me tell you this nugget here. So right after 7/10, me and my friend Jason went to BYU Hawaii, and we did a seminar there for the students. Peacemakers wanted. It was amazing. The students received it very well. We had all perspectives discussed, and it was an amazing presentation. But so far, it hasn't been posted online. It's been over a year, and it hasn't been posted. And we were told it will never be posted, because I don't know why. So yeah. So there you go.
I know why, but keep going.
But it's fine. I understand it, and I really do. It was beneficial to those souls who came in. I feel it impacted them. It helped them understand.
But it's sad, Jabra. It's still sad. It's sad that an academic cloud, and it's doesn't allow this to shine out and be bright and come out.
Yeah, it is. And
it's biased. It's very biased. It's not leaning toward gospel principles and doctrine, as you say. And it's academia. To me, it's not acceptable. I don't. It's not acceptable.
Here is another thing that I hope administrators, at the church and BYU recognize, that you look at the anti-Semitism on campus, that is, or K-12, which has been the bane of my existence this last 13 months. So you look at it and you look at the history of it, and it's really interesting because the roots of it, all of the leaders of the current anti-Semitic demonstrations on campus, all of them were educated in Middle Eastern studies departments in those universities, whether it's Yale or Harvard or Columbia, especially Columbia. It all started at Middle Eastern studies departments. So we do not want the Middle Eastern studies department at BYU, which I believe is a very important department. I believe we have this theological, religious tie to the land of Israel, even to the Palestinians and to the whole region. And we need those students. I mean, we need Arabic studies. We need Hebrew studies. We need people who know the culture and the history of the region. Because these people, and I know I'm right, I mean, look at all the immigration of Arabs and Muslims to Europe and North America. The equivalent of a Berlin Wall has fallen. Now we have access to these millions of people to teach the gospel to. Mm-hmm. And that's why we need the Middle Eastern Studies Department at BYU.
Sure, absolutely.
If I had any say, with BYU funding, I would double the funding of the Middle Eastern Studies Department, because you can't believe how much we need, people who understand Middle Eastern culture and languages. We need them desperately, in the church especially. But we cannot produce indoctrinated, biased students out of that department. We have to produce people with balanced points of view and opinions. That's what we need, so that we can go to the region and love all the people there and spread the gospel there. That's why we need Middle Eastern Studies Department at BYU. It is crucial to the mission of the church, I believe. And that's why it's sad to me. That's why I'm here with you talking about this. It's because they are important. But with the current situation, we can't have it. Again, I refer you to the Burning Book, Jason Olson's memoir. Mm-hmm. That's the part of the book that made me the saddest, is how he felt at BYU, how he felt sitting in a Middle Eastern history or something class at BYU and being shut down, and his Zionism not acknowledged, and people basically shutting him down. And so that needs to change. That needs to change.